Could the full truth behind the Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell cases finally emerge from the shadows? Or, will crucial details just stay sealed away? That's really the powerful question gripping so many people right now, and it's exactly what we want to unravel in this deep dive. The Department of Justice recently pushed to unseal grand jury testimony in these really notorious cases. They cited intense public interest and also a direct presidential directive. Yeah. But look, this isn't straightforward at all. It really represents a significant clash, doesn't it, between this deep-rooted legal tradition of secrecy and these, mounting calls for transparency.
Right.
We've already seen kind of a mixed bag, results-wise. A Florida judge rejected a similar request, while the battle for the New York records, that continues. So we're going to try and untangle the complex reasons behind these actions and explore the fierce debate over what the public truly has a right to know. Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we sift through, a stack of sources, articles, research, our own notes, really trying to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight, specifically for you. Today, our sources include things like DOJ actions, Epstein and Maxwell grand jury unsealing, some insights from DOJ requests judge unseal grand jury testimony at Trump's behest via the Daily Wire, Epstein files, legal battles, and political intrigue, and Epstein-Maxwell, public mistrust and calls for transparency, plus a few others. But before we really dig into why these specific files are so, contentious, maybe let's just make sure we're all on the same page about how a grand jury actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really essential to understand the basics of grand jury proceedings to grasp why this whole unsealing effort is such a big deal. A grand jury isn't like what you see in a trial on TV. It's typically a group of 16 to 23 citizens. Their job, fundamentally, is to look at evidence brought by prosecutors and decide if there's enough probable cause.
Probable cause.
Meaning basically a reasonable basis to believe a crime was committed. If they find there is probable cause, they issue a formal charge that's called an indictment.
Okay.
And that indictment sends the case towards a trial. Now, traditionally, these proceedings are kept secret. That's under U.S. law. And there are some very important reasons for that secrecy. First, to protect innocent people who might be investigated but never actually charged.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. And also to stop suspects from, fleeing if they hear they might be indicted. It also encourages witnesses to speak freely without fear of retaliation.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, it helps prevent potential trial jurors down the line from being influenced beforehand. So this secrecy, it's a long-standing cornerstone of our justice system, really.
Okay. So given all that deep tradition of grand jury secrecy, what exactly ignited this, fierce push for transparency with these particular files, these deeply sensitive files? And why now?
Well, the Department of Justice, under the Trump administration at the time, formally recorded the unsealing for, several quite compelling reasons. A primary driver, they stated, was a commitment to transparency. You had Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche emphasizing in a formal statement that, and I'm quoting here, transparency to the American public is of the utmost importance to this administration.
Okay, utmost importance.
Exactly. They were quite explicit, saying things like, the time for the public to guess what they contain should end. Beyond just that stated commitment, there's also been undeniably extensive public interest.
Huge interest.
Huge, especially after that July 6, 2025 DOJ and FBI memo came out. Now, that memo concluded, after what they called an exhaustive review of the Epstein files, that no credible evidence was found against uncharged third parties. But despite that conclusion, public interest it remained incredibly high. You had public officials, lawmakers, pundits, ordinary citizens, all deeply interested and concerned, as the sources put it, about the whole Epstein matter. So this ongoing scrutiny definitely put pressure on the DOJ to, shed more light on what they actually did. And we absolutely cannot overlook the presidential directive here.
Right. That was a big factor.
A very big factor. President Donald Trump explicitly directed Attorney General Bondi to, quote, produce any and all pertinent grand jury testimony subject to court approval. Now, this move came after weeks of, controversy surrounding the administration's handling of the Epstein case. This was a time when polling showed really widespread public distrust.
Yeah, I remember that. The numbers were quite low.
It's very low. Something like only 17% of Americans approved of Trump's handling, and more than 2/3 believed the federal government was actively hiding information.
Wow. Two-thirds.
Yeah. So this unsealing request, you could certainly see it as a direct response to that controversy and, frankly, the low public approval ratings on the issue. And finally, there's a very specific legal argument the DOJ is making. They're citing special circumstances.
Okay, what does that mean legally? Special circumstances?
Well, they're essentially arguing that grand jury secrecy, while important, is not absolute. That's the key phrase. In their view, the Epstein and Maxwell cases represent truly special circumstances because of their, quote, unparalleled notoriety and their status as critical pieces of an important moment in our nation's history. A really key part of their argument for unsealing is that Epstein's death means his personal privacy interests are substantially diminished.
Because he's no longer here to protect his own reputation or face charges.
Precisely. So that particular argument is a significant one. It's basically testing the boundaries of grand jury secrecy, suggesting that in cases with this much public interest, maybe transparency should outweigh those traditional protections.
That could definitely set a precedent, couldn't it?
It really could. For future high-profile cases, absolutely.
That's a really powerful set of arguments for unsealing these files. But, the victim's privacy is just such a paramount concern here. How did the DOJ say they'd balance that commitment to transparency with, their obligation to protect the people who suffered?
Yeah, that's a critical point, and the DOJ certainly addressed it directly. They pledged to work with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Their plan was to make appropriate redactions, basically blacking out names and details relating to victims and other personal identifying information before releasing any transcripts.
Okay, so redactions.
Yes. They specifically assured the public that, and again I'm quoting, transparency in this process will not be at the expense of our obligation under the law to protect victims. So the stated intent, at least, was to release as much information as possible without compromising the privacy and safety of those who were harmed. It's a delicate balance they claimed they could strike.
Right, a very delicate balance. But the story doesn't just end with the DOJ making the request, does it? The courts have weighed in, and like I mentioned, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. It seems like it created a real legal and maybe public relations minefield, especially with public opinion still so sharply divided.
That's precisely it. The unsealing efforts have definitely seen mixed results so far. In late July of 2025, you had U.S. District Judge Robin Rosenberg in West Palm Beach, Florida. She actually rejected the Trump administration's request.
Rejected it outright.
Rejected it. This was for the Epstein grand jury transcripts from back in 2005 and 2007 in Florida. The judge ruled pretty clearly that the request, quote, did not meet any of the extraordinary exceptions under federal law that would allow them to be made public.
So basically, saying special circumstances wasn't enough in that case.
Exactly. It shows just how high the bar is for breaking grand jury secrecy. It takes more than just notoriety. However, a similar request to unseal records is, as you said, still pending in New York. That's with Judge Richard M. Berman, who was the judge overseeing the case when Epstein died.
So it's not a done deal either way yet.
Not at all. It's not a unified legal front. The battle is playing out differently in different jurisdictions. We're still waiting to see what happens in New York.
This complexity, different courts making different rulings, it kind of raises an important question for me. Despite the administration's stated commitment to transparency, why do you think such widespread skepticism persists among the public? It just feels like no matter what they say or do, a lot of people just don't trust the process here.
Yeah, the skepticism is, it's palpable, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it seems to run pretty deep. Like we discussed, those polls at the time showed that widespread public distrust. That significant majority believing the federal government was actively withholding information. That feeling doesn't just disappear overnight. It's a sentiment that even led President Trump himself to kind of push back pretty hard against people focusing on the Epstein case. He suggested they'd fallen for a, quote, hoax pushed by his political opponents.
Right, that hoax comment drew a lot of attention.
It did. And, adding to this perception, maybe, of opaqueness, Attorney General Pam Bondi had that instance where she had to clarify an earlier statement. Remember, she initially suggested she had Epstein's client list on her desk.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Yeah, she later had to explain that she actually meant she had the Epstein files for review. Now, these kinds of clarifications, even if they're perfectly innocent mistakes, they can unfortunately fuel public doubts when trust is already so fragile.
Yeah, timing and phrasing really matter when things are this sensitive.
Absolutely.
So, What does this all mean for the kind of broader context of justice and public trust? Because beyond the official legal filings and the court decisions, there have been a number of pretty striking events, haven't there? Events fueling these widespread allegations of political interference, further complicating how the public sees all this.
Absolutely. And those events have only seemed to amplify the public suspicions. One really significant situation involves Maureen Comey, the federal prosecutor who was fired. Afterwards, she sent this email to her former colleagues in the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office. She warned them it was becoming harder for them to do their jobs without fear.
Wow. That's a strong statement.
Very strong. And that event was immediately interpreted widely by public commentators in all sorts of ways. You saw allegations of clear abuse of power, corruption, even retaliation. Some people speculated, that maybe she was fired because of what she knew about the case, maybe about who was involved.
Just speculation, but definitely fueled the fire.
Exactly. Then there's the, let's call it unusual involvement of Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Now, remember, he's the one who actually submitted the motion to unseal in Manhattan.
Right.
But it came out that in late July 2025, he had this lengthy meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell and her attorney, apparently quite unusual. And there was even a second meeting planned for the very next day.
A high-ranking DOJ official meeting with Maxwell directly while this is all going on.
Exactly. And public comments just exploded online. People immediately started suggesting these meetings weren't routine at all. Concerns were raised about a potential cover-up, maybe witness tampering, or even an attempt to, pressure her to lie or get their story straight regarding powerful figures.
Again, lots of speculation, but it certainly raises eyebrows.
It definitely raised eyebrows. And then just to add another layer to this already intricate situation, Ghislaine Maxwell herself has now been officially subpoenaed.
Subpoenaed by whom?
By the House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer. She's been directed to testify via deposition, basically give sworn testimony at the Federal Correctional Institution, Tallahassee, where she's held. That's set for mid-August 2025.
So Congress is getting involved directly now, too.
Directly. And the source material notes the DOJ is reportedly cooperating with this congressional demand. So it just indicates this really intense scrutiny coming from multiple branches of government on this whole ongoing saga.
Okay, if we try and connect this back to the bigger picture then. Ghislaine Maxwell's own legal saga, her personal case, it's continuing to unfold right alongside these transparency efforts. It's separate from the unsealing debate in a way, but still very much a central part of the public narrative, isn't it?
That's absolutely right. Ghislaine Maxwell's legal journey is far from over. She was, of course, convicted back in December 2021.
Right, for sex trafficking.
Exactly. And subsequently sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in Epstein's crimes. Now, her convictions were upheld on appeal in 2024.
So the appeal failed.
The initial appeal failed, yes. But she is still fighting it. She is currently petitioning the U.S. Supreme Court.
Going to the highest court.
Going to the highest court in the land, essentially asking them to review her case. So her own personal battle for, exoneration or maybe the reduced sentence, that continues in parallel with these wider efforts to unseal those crucial grand jury materials. It's just yet another facet of a story that keeps evolving.
We've really just dug into quite a bit there, the Department of Justice's efforts to bring more transparency to the Epstein and Maxwell cases, the significant legal hurdles they've encountered in different courts, and these swirling allegations of political interference that, continue to spark intense public debate. It's a story that really powerfully highlights the tension, doesn't it, between legal tradition, the public's understandable demand for answers, and just the complex realities of these high-stakes investigations.
And, this raises, I think, an important question for you, our listener, to maybe consider. As these complex legal battles over unsealing continue to play out, how do you think they will ultimately reshape public confidence, or maybe lack of confidence in the justice system? And perhaps what role do you see for yourself, if any, in demanding ongoing accountability?
That's a really powerful thought to leave you with, and one that definitely resonates given the ongoing public interest here. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Epstein files. We really encourage you to continue your own exploration of these crucial issues and, stay informed. We'll be back here with more in-depth analyses next time.